Picture-perfect family with some dark secrets. Viewers Edition. Hey folks, quick content warning for this video. There will be instances of assault and abusive behavior, so if you're kind of sensitive to that stuff, this might not be the video for you. Story 1. Oh my god. So, I had an Instagram mom as a neighbor last year. On Instagram, she was the most attentive, caring, loving mom that was constantly taking him places like museums and hikes and would post every single toy she bought him, would post her homemade meals and all that big picture perfect stuff. The first time I noticed that something didn't add up, he came over to my house to play with my son, who's a few years older than him. They were in my backyard while I started making dinner. He had been at my house since 3 or so. I got plates ready and told him to go ask his mom if he could eat spaghetti with my son. When he got back, he asked me why it looked weird. I said, probably because I used ground beef and then mixed it with the sauce and didn't put cheese on it yet. He tried it and was literally telling me with every bit how good it was. How he didn't like the spaghetti his mom made now, LOL. His mom came over at like almost 8 p.m. to get him and said thank you, but was surprised he ate it. I asked why. She said she's never made him spaghetti before, and he actually might not have ever had homemade spaghetti. I was like, wait, what? You post food from your kitchen daily. She door dashes, puts it on her plates, then posts it. LOL. Later in the summer, he started coming to my house as early as 7:30ish to play. I would immediately make him cereal. Throughout the weeks, I noticed when he went to his house to get something, I could hear him talking outside. I let it go. Come to find out, his mom was locking the doors and communicating with him through a Ring doorbell camera. She wouldn't unlock the door if she didn't think it was important. She would call me in a panic to send him over because his dad was coming to pick him up. She didn't want him knowing he was basically in my care from about 7:30 a.m. to around 10 p.m. daily. Neighbors would text me asking if I was home as the kid was waiting outside for hours until my son and I returned home. Called the cops and told them the situation. I don't want it to be a big thing, but I'd ask mom multiple times to not lock him out and to not send him to me so early. Never helps. Cops called back a week later and said that because he was being taken care of, he was able to communicate with her through a Ring doorbell and that he was being fed, etc., that CPS wouldn't come out as it wasn't extreme. I'll never forgive that crap. This is the kind of, influencer culture dash that so many people are after that I just can't wrap my head around. I know that I wouldn't call myself an influencer. I'm not influencing you to get anything, I don't think. And who am I? I'm nobody. People don't even know my name. But it's weird for me to talk about it, so take it with a grain of salt. But people who are chasing this stuff to the point where they're just faking everything to try and get, the attention, posting fake meals and stuff like that and pretending like you have the best family when you're ignoring your kid. I feel like stuff like this is becoming more and more common. I keep hearing about this stuff and folks, you gotta be able to just live your life. Don't chase everything online. I know I do this, but I work within specific hours. I don't work on the weekends and everything, I get stuff done ahead of time. I try and make sure that I can actually live and enjoy my life, and I'm not just chasing clout. That just can't possibly be healthy. I don't know. I could rant about this forever. No one wants to listen to me. Story 2. As someone who has experienced mental, physical, and abuse/assault from not just both sides of the family, but from kids at my school and old daycares, I cannot begin to explain how messed up these people are. Okay, so here's a story. This is just one of many, though. When I was younger, my mom and dad would fight constantly. I hated watching them fight, so it would always bring me to tears. A few years later, they separated, and when it came my time to see my dad, who would assault me, and since I was 5 at the time, I didn't know what it was, but it still made me feel upset and made me cry because I knew it was wrong. Then when I was 7, my mom gave birth to my younger sister. We found out her dad was on drugs, so my mom and her dad broke up and we moved with my Mima. I still had to see my dad and deal with that same crap over and over again. As for my Mima, she would abuse us, and if we didn't do something how she wanted it done, she would manipulate us and cause my mom to freak out, which made her start to scream and yell at us when our Mima was angry. I couldn't even read any books without anyone yelling at me. That's how insane it was. Now I suffer from phonophobia, the fear of loud noises, depression, and anxiety. Thank you, horrible families, for those traumas creating scenes. This kind of stuff, it really breaks my heart to read this kind of stuff because there's not a lot I can say except that things can always get a lot better. You can eventually get away. Eventually you get to an age where you can talk to someone that you can trust, an adult figure, someone. But I encourage anyone in a situation like this to please do that as soon as you are able to. And I wish I had better advice, because when you're that age, it's so tough. And I mean, kids that age aren't going to be watching my videos, but folks, if you have kids, please teach them to trust you enough to tell you when something as awful as this is happening. Yeah. Story 3. I've won. Be warned, it is long and a bit effed up. My old friend from 3rd grade came with a lot of money. They would dress her in the best clothes, give her the most expensive school supplies, and she was tutored at home to make sure she was at least a grade above everyone else. But when she went to school, she was never sent with lunch money or food from home. She told me on many occasions that she was not allowed to, or she would go without dinner. I would share my lunch with her because I felt so bad. When lunch ended, she would sneak under the tables and eat scraps off the floor. And when she was found by staff, they did nothing about it. They would make her a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and send her back to class. As I got to know her, she told me that her parents were too busy to hang out. I went out of my way to invite her to choir and art after-school activities. I was actually invited to her house one time. I was scheduled to leave the bus with her. I was excited because she told me her room was huge, that her house had a pool, and she had a computer that we could play Barbie games on. When we arrived at the stop, her mom told the bus driver that plans changed and I wasn't allowed to stay. Both of us were super crushed. We tried to make a sleepover happen a few times after that, but her parents kept saying no. I knew her for about 4 months before she stopped coming to school. I don't remember the specific reason, but I'm pretty sure some of the kids in our school told their parents about her and they reported it to the authorities. I asked around to see if anyone knew what happened to her, but it was all rumor and speculation, like she went to Hollywood, they went on vacation to Europe, a family member died, etc. Story 4. When I was young, I thought my family was absolutely perfect. Nothing was wrong between my parents and life was great. Until last year, December, when my parents told me they wanted to divorce. It turns out my parents aren't the picture-perfect people I thought they were. My mom had a horrible childhood, and she would literally have to take care of her parents because they would be drunk and smoke a lot. I don't know much about my dad, so I won't go in depth there. All I know is that things were happening behind the scenes, and I never knew until this year. I was so confused and realized that they have been hiding it all from me. They told my brother and sister, but never me. I'm always the soft one in the family, so I guess they have a point. Probably would not have taken that well. Still going through the whole process of living in 2 houses and trying to figure out what really happened to BTS. So I don't know your whole situation, and I'm not at all judging what you've said here. I don't want to come across that way. I did just want to add in, folks, that parents getting divorced, people getting divorced, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily a failing. It just happens in some relationships. And, you know, yeah, sometimes it's incompatibilities. There might be fighting in the background that you weren't seeing, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. And I just like to say that because kids seeing, you know, family members, you know, their parents divorcing, I don't want you to think that it's some awful dark secret, because that almost kind of implies that it should be shameful, and I don't think it is. I think we need to get rid of that stigma around divorce. It can be the healthiest option and best way to proceed forward for some folks. So that's all I wanted to say. Otherwise, I am sorry for what you've personally gone through. Like I said, I don't want to dismiss your own feelings and what you've been through. Story 5. As a little girl, I thought my family was perfect until 2015 rolled around and I realized how incredibly toxic it is. My mom picks favorites and is a massive narcissist who also emotionally/mentally and physically abusive towards my siblings and I. My brother and I were the fortunate ones to not get physically harmed. Can't say the same for my older sisters. My dad's a complete drunk and sometimes assumes I abuse my brother, which I don't. My first oldest sister is my mom's golden child and is also a narcissist, and my second sister was just diagnosed with ADHD and other serious health issues, which is all thanks to my mom. As for me, I'm starting to notice that I could have undiagnosed anxiety and OCD, which I need to get tested first. I also have high-functioning autism and dyslexia. My parents fight a lot, and mom shares personal things I could care less about. My first sister paints my mom as a saint and makes me feel like crap. And thankfully, my second sister left home and is doing far better now. She's working on helping me live on my own. Story 6. I used to get spanked by my dad for 13 years, which was also just as long as my Taekwondo career. This year, 2022, for future reference, I got back at him for secretly recording his voice with the camera app and putting it on my now password or somehow hacked Instagram account that I don't use anymore, of course. I put a couple of hashtags. My dad and I got into a heated argument with him yelling and raising his voice at me and vice versa after he left the dog locked upstairs in the upstairs bathroom, and she was there barking while locked up since my dad likes to dig up and take out the upstairs bathroom trash. Later, after I secretly recorded him, he then found at least 1 to 3 months later, told me to fully turn my phone off, checked for a recording device or some security camera in my closet, and we talked. Thank God I posted that on my Instagram account that is saved on the account. I don't know if the account is still up, but I don't care. I'm glad that I got him back in a way years later. Story 7. I just want to throw out there that I have several friends who are clinically bipolar. I've particularly known 2 of them at points of their lives where they have thought their medication was optional and had episodes. And while they were definitely pretty out there off their meds, none of them ever acted out violently in the slightest. I hope that no one here equates bipolarity with violence, but if you do know someone who is bipolar who thinks that they don't need their meds, that's a huge red flag. Thankfully, a friend of mine who used to think that way at one point now takes their meds regularly and their lives are quite stable, even if one of them is just straight up weird. Story 8. My family tried to put out the image of a struggling yet close working class family with autistic kids and a heroic mother, but the reality was that both my parents were a lot better off than they seemed. I didn't have autism, and my mother was an extremely manipulative and borderline tyrannical predator who, along with my father, abused me throughout my childhood and even my early adult years. Now the mask has slipped, she's under police investigation, and I've been estranged from my entire family for almost 2 years. A local safeguarding team is also keeping an eye on the household and performing routine checks to make sure things don't get any worse. That woman forced me to live a lie for 20 years, and I often feel like I've only just started properly existing the estrangement. I'm honestly hoping she goes to prison. I mean, I hope that prison is involved as well for what they did. That's monstrous. I'm so sorry that that had to affect your life for 20 years. But I'm glad that you've gotten away from that. And I know that you've only just started feeling like you're properly existing. And I hope that you can find joy and good times in life. And I'm glad that you shared this, is what I want to say. I'm thankful that you could share this because there might be other people going through the same kind of thing. Dog collar, sorry. And it's, I think it's good for people in those situations to know that things can get better. And I'm sorry that sometimes it can take this long, but things can get better and you can have a fulfilling life afterward. Just find someone you can trust as soon as you can and get out of bad situations. Story 9. Last one is super, super sad. I understand the feeling of not being able to help, but sometimes it's a matter of when you can. The story about the girl crying with her boyfriend because of the things he did is just absolutely effing horrible. I feel so bad for a time who has to go through that or any abuse. Parents push kids to their limits and expect them to love you. Let them be them and set them on the right track. Story 10. My mother's family built their entire life around looking impeccable. 3 kids, dogs, house and property, nobleman ancestry. Dad had a cushy government job. They had a car before anyone else in their town. All 3 kids had straight A's. One of them grew up to be a lawyer. The one who grew up as a lawyer has a kid, my cousin, with an ED who nearly died from it. And her dad can no longer practice law because his license got revoked a while back due to taking hush-hush money. My mom's got bipolar disorder from severe childhood trauma. Their dad was physically and mentally abusive, so their mom became an alcoholic, and all 3 kids grew up in terror. Their 3rd sibling left the country as soon as she could. I don't talk to my grandparents on that side because when I was depressed, self-harming 16-year-old, my grandma told me to hang myself, and my granddad backed her. Story 11. Something tells me that next time I see someone with straight A's, they're probably threatened with very harsh punishment back at home. Even though I got punished for bad grades and not turning things in many times in the past, the punishments were your typical electronics takeaways or the loss of the ability to do your favorite activities. It's usually because I wasn't using opportunities to do better and bring up scores. While the threat of electronic takeaways have pushed me to do well in school and aim for C's and attempt to aim for A's and B's, the stories of the straight A kids are crazy to me. Story 12. I'm the exact same as the last story. We see and experience so much pain and suffering that we try to counter our permanent depression that comes from it by living to the extreme. Entertaining and giving good times to other people is the closest we can get to happiness. I don't know if that's just my perspective or that I'm just on this plane of existence for a good time, not a long one. Story 13. My family is the reverse. We were always judged as poor and thus dirty, etc., basically calling us white trash, yet we were just a lower middle class, large, happy family with anxiety, and most of us were introverts but had good grades, good hygiene, and never went hungry. And as adults, I can say we're all better adjusted adults than all of our peers and friends. We just didn't do a lot of after-school things and were more bookworms than athletic. I got bullied by adults and kids like I will never forget getting pulled out of class to be harassed by staff about poor hygiene, but I was a germaphobe, aka cleanest and best smelling in my class. I was peed. Story 14. There was this one girl who we're gonna call Ava. Literally looked like Sharpay from HTM. Super smart, kind, and loving. Her mother was head of the PTA, her father a high-ranked member of a banking company, and she herself was captain of the cheer team, vice president of the math club, and this close to starting her own book club. Oh, and also she was head of the student body organization. Now I will list all the dirty secrets of her family. Father, Ard the neighbor's child and took naughty voice recordings, sent to jail for 8 years. Mother, heavily depressed and was suffering from some sort of illness but refusing to tell anybody, later died of overdose. Ava, had 2 boyfriends and 1 girlfriend, had intercourse regularly with the girlfriend and made the girlfriend send her videos of her making naughty noises. Both the boyfriends were abusive. Ava hooked up with the PE coach too. This is what happens when you live in California, man. I mean, it definitely sounds like Ava's father had an awful dark secret and sounds like a repugnant human. It sounds like Ava's mother was probably dealing with, some pretty bad trauma, which is unfortunate. But, I mean, I guess it's a dark secret. But again, I feel like that has like a shameful connotation, and that shouldn't be. That's just sad. And I don't know, Ava being in, I'm guessing, high school or college from the sound of this, like 2 boyfriends and a girlfriend and having intercourse and stuff. That's, I don't know, human experimentation. I mean, safety, and I wouldn't recommend entering into intercourse at that age. But, I mean, we know what happens and everything. That doesn't seem like a shameful thing. And once again, it just seems sad that her boyfriends were abusive. I have no idea what this has to do with California. Story 15. Watching this makes me feel better about my life because my life is the complete opposite. I've been married to my husband for 4 years and together for 7. When we were still dating, I was a toxic and clingy person, which people thought we are not a happy couple, and they thought I was controlling my husband, but the fact is actually the opposite. I'm not a control freak, but my husband just uses those excuses to avoid hanging out with them. Story 16. So recently I got told about the past of my family before my mom and dad got married. My mom told me that on the dad's side, his mom said she didn't like my mom because my grandmother mom's side told her that she could wear the hijab anytime she could and anywhere she could, but the other grandma didn't agree with that. Even further back, my grandparents were in a racism group type thing and they didn't know it. I know this is not as bad as the others, but this is still messed up. Story 17. My old babysitter is a registered nurse. Her husband died of an accidental OD on his depression meds, and she's taken the time since to throw herself back into her career. She had completed nursing school in the 90s but dropped out to raise their 3 kids. She's making lots of money and becoming heavily committed to her faith. Everything seemed on the up and up. The thing is, she was still collecting welfare checks under her married name, but applied for her new job under her maiden name and using her mother's social security number. They're only 18 years apart. The cops arrested her, and she's been charged with multiple counts of fraud. Story 18. Yeah, my family is very much like this. On the outside, it's pretty great. Mom and dad are still together, 3 kids, nice house, both parents work full-time, all the kids get decent grades, and 2 of them do sports. In reality, one of the kids, youngest, is extremely considering self-termination and has been since he was 11. One of them, the middle, is depressed and is hoping somebody will notice, but no one ever does. And the third one, the oldest, is transphobic, homophobic, and whenever his grades aren't very good, our parents won't let him sleep until he fixes it and won't help him at all. Our dad is also transphobic and will never accept the third son who is trans because he wants his perfect little girl back. Mom pretends to be accepting but isn't, and the only person who will accept him is one of his brothers. Dad is abusive but not enough to get child services involved, and Mom sits by and watches it happen and simply looks away when we look to her for help, waiting for the day I can move out and get away from everything. Oh yeah, and the third son is autistic and no one pays attention to see or care.
Honestly, it sounds like a whole family that really just needs to engage in some therapy, both individually and perhaps as a group. It sounds like everyone is dealing with stuff. A youngest kid at that age, thinking about taking their own life, and, middle-aged kid being depressed. Like, there's a lot going on there, and it seems like there's a lot of unfortunate emotional trauma going on in that household, and I hope the kids are able to find some help and get away, and that the parents find some help too.
Story 19. My family is pretty much the opposite of these. My family sounds awful at first, but we're the best. I have 2 moms. One is trans. I'm tall, so kids ask how I got so tall or ask if my dad is tall. I say he left for the milk. It's an inside joke. My parents are divorced, and I live with trans mom. It sounds terrible, but we're a really nice, supportive family who lets my friends stay over if they get kicked out. Story 20. I don't know the situation for the poster, but all growing up, my family had to keep most of the doors in our house under lock and key. The reason was because my twin brother has severe autism, and it was unsafe for him to be anywhere we didn't have direct line of sight of him at all times, especially at night. Any door or window leading out of the house was especially locked and fortified. We would keep every room that wasn't the main room we were all in locked, and there was nothing at all in the hallways so that we knew he was safe. He also had many severe food allergies, so yes, we kept the fridge and pantry chained and padlocked. Not an ideal way to live, but kept my brother safe. As he has gotten older and had many intensive therapies and such, my family hasn't had to keep everything on lockdown quite as much, but they still do chain and padlock the fridge and have a number code lock on the pantry that changes every so often. The front and back doors are also still locked at times from the inside, but we don't really have to worry about him bolting as much at night because he loves his sleep now. Story 21. I thought my family was perfect, and still think it was. When my mom had cancer, my father stayed on her side during the whole time. She died from COVID, and since then my life has been chaotic. Within 2 weeks, my father got a girlfriend and moved out. I was horrified. He just left me and my brothers by ourselves. So suddenly, I still do not believe it happened. Story 22. Well, on my mother's side, they were wealthy, but my grandfather was having affairs for years and was abusive, and my grandmother has severe OCD and might be a narc and was emotionally abusive. My father's home life involved his stepbrothers molesting him for years. When he told, parents didn't believe him until his brother finally admitted that he was a victim too. My family was never very picture perfect, but a lot was hidden behind closed doors. Story 23. My now ex-girlfriend's father has a very successful butcher shop in the city I live in. He also has open, unstitched wounds on his hands that he uses to touch the meat. My ex's sister is praised for being an amazing mother. She would also dump her son onto me and now ex so she could get drunk almost every day. Also, I learned later that my ex has had 15 boyfriends before me who she broke up with because she was bored with them. Story 24. When I was in high school, I had a crush on a beautiful girl in my class. I asked her out. She said no problem there, as she had a reputation as an ice maiden and never dated anyone. Fast forward a couple of years, I ended up becoming an apprentice engineer and worked alongside her dad, who was my instructing tradesman. Seemed like a nice guy, if a little batty, kind of a hippie, and owned pottery as a sideline/hobby. One day his daughter told her mom that dad had been regularly forcing herself on him since she was 13. She left him, of course, and took the kids. Police are not informed and no charges laid. Then everyone knew why his daughter was so cold with guys. A few years later, he married again to a Thai mail-order bride. Awful term, but it describes it the way it was. And was soon national news when he murdered her and later killed himself in prison.
I mean, I feel awful for her and dealing with a father that would do something like that to her. That's disgusting. And yeah, to hell with him. But for her, I hope she was able to find, someone to talk to, stuff like that. Therapy. And it also goes to show that sometimes when other people are like, oh, she's an ice mated, she doesn't date anyone, then maybe there's a reason. And maybe when people might seem, standoffish or antisocial or something, maybe there are reasons there, and we should be a little less harsh with our judgments about stuff we don't know about, because they might be going through some real crap.
Story 25. That last story is messed up. Something about that husband is messed up and unnatural. 3 years and he's over his wife killing herself? 3 years, and if she was truly that mentally ill, he dismissed it as she was just crazy. I don't know, something about him felt cold and psychopathic. Also, goddamn, the stories of the girls getting SA'd by their fathers are so messed up. Story 26. I'm English, and I'm lucky enough to go to an expensive private school. The school is in a small countryside village. A large number of people who lived in the village have children who go to the school. Well, a kid who lived in the village and looked like he had a normal, well-off family was sad because his parents were both alcoholics. Story 27. That 6th story is horrifying. I've never been genuinely terrified by a story before, but the fact that the girl's sister had to have a hysterectomy because of that awful man, I hope they both escaped and are recovering/have recovered. Story 28. To anyone dealing with similar issues to the last story, you're not alone. As a not-so-wise man once said, we're all mad here. Reach out to people you trust. Get professional help. It does get better eventually. But don't give up, because it is an obtainable goal. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.